Is a zoom lens good for portraiture? In my last few shoots over the last weekend, I brought this 2870 with my Canon R3 out and did a few shoots with it, just to find out myself whether a zoom lens can work out very well or not for a portrait photographer. And today's video, I'd like to share with you my experience of using a zoom lens for portrait shoots. I'm Richard and welcome to ZP Productions, and if you follow me, I do a lot of portraiture, and I've been shooting over the last weekend like 4 or 5 shoots using mainly this zoom lens here. Now, to be fair, this is one of the best. This is the 2870 f2, but when it comes to image quality itself, I would say that, any of the modern 2470s are very equivalent to it, just that they don't have the f2 factor. But that's really about it. So I've been using this zoom lens for the purpose of portrait shoots, and I'm a camera and equipment reviewer, so I have the luxury to try out a lot of lenses. And I can tell you first, is that the zoom lens cannot beat a prime lens for image quality. And also, if you are looking at similar spec but a single focal length, a zoom lens will always cost more. What do I mean? If you are looking at high-end primes like this is the 51.2, it costs pretty much the same price as a good zoom. But of course, if you're comparing something like the 85 1.8 from Nikon here, this is a good prime lens, but it is a 1.8. This is significantly cheaper than most good zooms. However, in terms of image quality, the high-end prime like this 51.2 here is very, very, very sharp. But the mid-level primes can be a hit or miss, where 51.8 is very good, but I felt that the 35 1.8 isn't that great. Same for the zooms. The high-end zooms are very good. 2870 here is very good. Definitely not as good as the 51.2 GM, but definitely good enough for most type of photography. So with that out of the way, let's look at things that I thought would have mattered but didn't. Next, I'll talk about the pros of using a zoom lens. Then I talk about the cons of using the zoom lens in the field itself. Now, the first thing I'll talk about is carrying on from the conversation just now, and that is image quality. Now, as I said, I know, and I have tested many, that more often than not, a prime is better than a zoom. But does it matter in real world shoot? I would say as probably not. A modern zoom like this 2870 here, or in fact most 2470s, the modern versions, are really good. They are, I would say, as lacking nothing in the image quality department. Maybe the bokeh, which I'll talk about at the end. So I looked through the photos for the past few shoots, and I can honestly say that for the purpose of looking at the shots, the quality of the shots, the image quality, and whether am I comfortable giving it to the clients or giving it to my cosplayers that work with me, my collaborators, I'll say as no. I have no issues handing over to them. I felt that the image coming out of the zoom lens was pretty much as good as it should be. And I will probably not worry about the image quality. As such, I would say that it is a surprise to me at times. I thought that I'll be a bit more picky, but when it comes to real world shoot, more often than not, I'm throwing away photos due to bad composition, something extra in the frame, the subject is not doing the right thing, or maybe for some reason my lighting is off, or maybe I have a handshake and there's some other issues to it. I will probably not throw a photo away due to image quality. It really didn't matter to me as much as I thought it will. So that is one thing. When it comes to modern zoom, I think the image quality is pretty much good enough for the purpose of portraiture. The next thing is the weight. Now, this is massively heavy, of course. This is the f2. A lot of the f2.8s are less than half the weight of this. But even this lens isn't that heavy. If you actually compare to all these lenses that I put together here, pretty much the 24 to 85 1.8s from Nikon. It is about the same weight, and the focal range is about the same for this zoom lens here. It is just slightly off here and there, but I would say as 3 of these lenses will be slightly lighter than this, but close. But the problem isn't about all these lenses weight. The problem mainly is about the fatigue when you are using the lens in the field. You know, trying to hold a heavy lens like that does give you more fatigue for the same time. And this is where I felt it was different. Using a zoom lens was slightly quicker. I'll cover it more extensively in my pros part of this review. But I can just say that if you're talking about fatigue of using a zoom lens versus a prime lens for the purpose of portraiture, I'll say that they are about the same or almost negligible. Because, you do shoot quicker with this, and as such, you end the shoot faster before even fatigue sets in. That's how I felt about it regarding the, zoom lenses for the purpose of portraiture when it comes to weight. And when it comes to size, I will honestly say when you are shooting, size don't really matter when you are shooting. But the part where size matter is when you are packing. Now, packing this lens and this camera here, it is quite a big and chunky thing, but all you need is just a bag with a deep socket, a deep hole to put them all in. Now, packing this, very similar size, this is the Z9, and 3 lenses is probably slightly harder because you need separate compartments. If not, the lens starts banging each other and you'll scratch your lens up. And if you really want to be more precise, it will be about 3.5 or maybe 4 lenses, because if you want to cover the full range, it is closer like this. And trying to pack multiple lenses is a bit more troublesome than packing a single zoom. So that's something to note. So really, if you're looking at focal length and you're looking at image quality, you're looking at weight and cost, I'll say as the difference between the zoom and primes are quite negligible, at least from my experience. Unless you like to shoot your portraits for hours and you have either a very small bag or a very big bag, then maybe you'll see more difference itself. Now, when it comes to the pros, it's quite straightforward. A zoom lens allows you to view immediately the different perspective. And why is this important? Now, perspective does change how the photos feel. Wide angle usually gives a more dynamic feeling, a more closeness to the scene itself. And if you shoot something between, like, say 35 to 40, 50 mm, normally you'll get the subject is close to you, and it gives, I would say, as the different type of feeling compared to shooting at a 70 millimeters, which will just feel a bit far, a bit disconnected, and a bit isolated. That's how it feels. So perspective is very important. And if you want to tell a story, normally a wide angle lens is better. But if you want to focus on the subject, a narrow, long focal length lens is better. I'm not even talking about bokeh here. I'm talking about isolating the background away from the subject and all the perspective distortions that come with it. A zoom lens allows you to quickly view those perspectives, make the decisions. And in the shoot itself, you may want to use different focal lengths. Maybe you prefer the 50 millimeters most of the time because you like that normal looking, less distorted feel, but yet within a distance that you feel connected to the subject. But at times you want to tell a story, so you open up wide angle. Or you want a dynamic shot, you open up wide angle. And then you just want to isolate the subject. You just want the subject to be in focus, and you're going to shoot maybe a half body shots. That's where you want a 70 millimeters. Now with the prime lens, you have to change lens and imagine. That's the hard part, imagine. Now even an experienced photographer, I've been shooting for 10 over years, I'll say as it is really hard to imagine every single focal length. You know what is a wide angle, what is a narrow angle, and what is somewhere in between. But it's really hard to imagine. You tell me 44 millimeters, I really cannot imagine what is that. But that said, a zoom lens allows you to see it all in the viewfinder, while a prime lens requires you to change, take a look, does it fit? No, change again, take a look, does it fit? That kind of thing is a bit more cumbersome itself. So overall, I think that is the biggest advantage of the zoom lens, allowing you to preview all the perspective and to get so many different type of feels within a single lens. Now, the next thing is related to it, and that is a pro to me also, and that is time. As I said, to see the different perspective itself, you need to change lens. That consumes you a lot of time. And a zoom lens just don't need to change, you just take it up straight away, do the photo shoot, and get it over and done with. That is one of the major time savers, because normally in a shoot, you'll probably want to have two lenses so that you have a slightly different feel when required. And the changing lens thing can be quite cumbersome and troublesome, especially if you're changing in a place like a beach. You want to have a secure location to change your lens, which will require you time to walk there. And the other thing, a very small minor thing about time saving in the real world is, what if something is just slightly cropped because it's too zoomed in? What if it's just a little too wide? Now, with a prime lens, of course, you can say take a step back, take a step forward, or take 2 steps forward and back. It's not that hard. But with a zoom lens, it's even quicker. You just need to turn 2 mm forward, 2 mm back, that kind of thing. Now, shifting like 5 millimeters from 70 to 65 really don't change your perspective much, but it can save you a few steps. And that actually, in the real world, does speed up photography. It does speed up like that few minutes in the entire photo shoot itself. Something to consider really. Not a really big deal, but overall, in addition to changing lens, the total time saving of using a zoom lens is significant. And I'll probably say that if you are looking at the same amount of shots, maybe, I'll say as 10 to 20 minutes in an hour shoot, means you're looking at 40 to 50 minutes compared to a 60-minute shoot with a prime lens and changing lens in between. The alternate viewpoint is that in the same hour with a zoom lens, you can probably take a lot more shots with a lot more perspective. So that's the difference. Now, so what are the cons of using a zoom lens? Now, the first con, obviously, is the bokeh quality. If you're using an f2 lens like this, or even let's say a cheaper one, an f2.8 version, you definitely cannot get the isolation of a good prime. Even these 1.8s here will look better, because firstly they're 1.8 compared to f2, they are slightly better. And not only that, because their optical construction is less complex than a zoom lens, normally their bokeh are slightly smoother and slightly nicer. But that said, rarely do anybody comment your photo is great because of the bokeh or your photo is bad because of the bokeh. The only time it happens if I'm using some really weird antique lens with like cat eye bokehs that swirls and all the funny things, or if not, I'm using something like a 70, or should I say not 70, 200 millimeters f2 where it blows the bokeh to smithereens. Yeah, so these are the times where people say, oh, the bokeh is different, it looks great or it looks bad. But more often than not, it really don't matter. So if you're of course shooting in a very, very messy environment, then a prime lens will still perform slightly better than a zoom lens, because it does have a nicer bokeh quality normally, not all the time, normally. Now the next thing that I felt make a difference to me is that given the same aperture setting and the same focal length, a prime lens is definitely lighter, as I said earlier in just now the weight part. As such, a zoom lens more than not requires two-hand operations if you're looking at a good zoom. I mean, the 24-17 Sigmas or even the new Nikon and Sonys, they are not small lenses, so they probably need two hands to operate optimally. Especially with this lens, you require a lot of strength with one hand if you're holding like that. It's just bad balancing. Two hands is very easy because one hand is on the proper point where the camera balances, while the other hand is just controlling it. So it doesn't create that much fatigue and in a proper balanced position itself. However, it does mean that I need two hands to hold my camera, compared to if I was using this setup here, I would have used one hand. What happens is the other hand can direct the subject itself. And I've said many times, in the portrait shoot, that is very important, directing your subject. And using a hand to direct, you just point here, point there, it's a lot easier, because your voice may not reach the subject, and not only that, the environment may be noisy, or maybe it may just be a bit far, especially at 70 millimeters. So, there are a lot of factors why your voice will not work as good as your hands. So now, how does all this, conclude, if you ask me? I'll say as a zoom lens is a very good lens for portraiture, especially if you are not sure which focal length works best for you and your photo shoot. Definitely consider using a zoom lens, especially if you don't have the experience or you're not too sure what lens is good for your photo shoot itself to get the effect that you want. A zoom lens is more convenient. That said, a prime lens still has its space. If you know what you want, a prime lens is better. If you can just choose 2 prime lenses, it's still better than holding one big zoom. And if you can choose only 1 prime lens, then a high-end prime lens like this do provide noticeable better bokeh and also noticeable better image quality. At times, not all the time. Especially compared to 2870, maybe not so much, but more often not, especially at the corners, a high-end prime is better. So really, that's about it. I think the zoom has its space, especially for portraiture. So don't be shy using your zoom in a portrait setting. People can tell you that prime is the way out, but you definitely can use your zoom. And really, that's about it. I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.